Kuphina kuphi emakhaya amadolobheni asekomplasta khona sakumukela mbukele ke hlelo lakho Yilungelo Lakho, it's your right. Mbukele ke, to what extent can you use the COVID-19 lockdown period as an excuse for not paying your child's school fees? Well, that is a question on many parents' minds. Kanzi ke bekunene tiphathimadla tithi kungabhadali ke imali yesikolo ngesikhathi isikolo tivaliwe kungaba nemthelela lomubi kutemfundvo. Mina ke ngingisimphiwe Ngcongwane kanzi leli Lungelo Lakho asingene endzabeni yethu namhla. Teachers offer an important service that has to be paid for by parents, but the current lockdown as a result of COVID-19 has interrupted schooling and children are stuck at home, some only relying on online or electronic tutoring. But is it fair for some parents to argue for non-payment of school fees on the account of the current lockdown? Ukhuluma kabanti ke bekunene ngendzaba yethu namhla asimukele ke via Skype sina Lebohang Montjane yena ke umele tikolo letingekho ke ngephasi kwahulumende phecelezi ema-independent schools. Also via Skype we are joined by Paul Colditz yena ke uvela a Federation for School Governing Bodies of South Africa, and we would try to have on the line the Basic Education Department spokesperson, but we were not successful to have on the line. But for now, let me welcome both of you gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Pui.
All right.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you too. Mr. Paul, I'm going to start with you. Take us through what your organization does and the kind of impact it has suffered as a result of the COVID-19.
Well, all schools have severely suffered because of COVID-19. Financially, of course, because of the fact that parents argue that they're no longer obliged to pay school fees, which is a wrong position they're taking. But I'll explain that later when we get to explaining the nature of the obligation of payment of school fees. But it certainly has a serious impact on the activities of schools and on the readiness of schools when they are reopened to provide the service that parents would be expected from them.
So how will not paying fees impact the overrunning of schools? Just a general perspective. Hi, Paul. Hi, Paul. Are you there? Can you hear me? Hi, Mr. Colditz. Please indicate if you can hear me.
Hello, are you speaking to me?
Yeah, Paul Colditz, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right. I was asking how the non-payment of school fees will impact the overall running of the schools in just generally.
Yes, can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Go on.
Okay. Yes, it has had a severe impact on the activities of schools and on the ability of schools to fulfill their own obligations, which they have, which are ongoing obligations. The fact that the building is closed doesn't mean the school has ceased to exist. The school is still in existence. It has obligations that it has to meet, and certainly because of the fact that parents are withholding their school fees under the impression that they're not obliged to pay if there is no service, then schools are suffering in the process. I think it's necessary that we should explain the nature of the obligation to pay school fees for a proper understanding of why it's important to pay school fees.
So are you also calling for the continuation of the payment of school fees in full or partially? And do explain your reasons for either.
Yes. Well, let's start with the nature of the obligation. The obligation to pay school fees is what is known as a statutory obligation. That means that the law obliges you to pay. In this case, the South African Schools Act. If you are a parent, you have a child at a fee-paying school, and provided that the parent meeting of that school has decided that school fees will be payable, then you're obliged to pay unless you're exempted. And we can discuss the issue of exemptions a little later, but it's like income tax. It's like any tax. And in fact, school fees are indirect taxes that need to be paid. So I have to pay income tax on my income, irrespective of whether I believe I receive a service from the state or from the municipality or whoever. I'm obliged by the law to pay, and exactly the same principle applies to school fees. You're obliged to pay if you are able to pay. If you're unable to pay, then you must apply to the school governing body for exemption, and the school governing body must then apply the exemption regulations in determining whether you can be and should be exempted from your liability to pay school fees.
Well, fair enough. You make a point that parents should continue paying school fees for their children as a result of the fact that they are constitutionally, and legally mandated to do so. But the question is, why should parents pay the school fees in full? Because in as much as we do understand that there are certain overheads that need to be paid, such as the electricity, such as security at the school buildings, but then why do they have to pay the fees in full when the service is not being rendered, when children are still staying at home and not learning?
Well, the important thing is that the effect of a approval of a school's budget has a legal effect. And in that budget, you'll determine the school fee for the year. So that would say amount to 5,000 Rand per annum, which can be divided into 10 installments of, for example, 500 Rand each. What we have done now is to advise our members to go back and see if they can reorganize, reprioritize the school program and also reprioritize the budget. But they're not able to reduce the amount of the school fee without a resolution of the parent body of the school. And it's impossible to have such a meeting for the parents to decide on a reduction of the school fee at this stage. So the other alternative, other than applying for exemption, is to give parents a payment holiday. Those who are suffering, those who are experiencing a reduction in their own salaries, to make an arrangement with those parents between the school governing body and the school for a payment holiday, for as the banks are doing, for example, instead of spreading the installments over a period of 10 months, to spread it over 12 months, but provided that the full amount is then paid towards the end of the year. And we can go further as far as the implications are concerned. If parents withhold their school fees, what the implications for schools will be. One example is the fact that we estimate that about 150,000 people are employed by school governing bodies in non-educator but also in educator posts. And the majority of those are non-educator posts: cleaners, secretaries, financial persons, administrative assistants, etc. And all those people's jobs will be on the line if schools cannot generate enough income to pay their salaries, even at a reduced level.
All right, we'll pick up on that point, Mr. Colditz, after the break. We'll leave you there for now. Nawe-ke Mbukeli ungaba ingxenye-ke inkulumo yethu namhlanje kusishayela licingo ku-0117146918 noma-ke 0117146919. Kanti-ke futhi ungabeka nembono wakho ku-Facebook. Kwanyalo-ke asesisishelele ngasetitolo-ke. After the break, we'll have a conversation with Lebohang Montjane. He's the Executive Director of the Independent Schools Association of South Africa. Yena-ke umelele-ke ema-private school. We've just heard the point from Mr. Paul Colvitz. Yena-ke umelele ema-school governing bodies representing some of the public schools. Please make sure that you're part of this conversation. It is very, very important that we hear your thoughts and your views with regards to this. Yilungelo Lakho asesishelele ngasethi makethe. To continue paying or not paying school fees during this lockdown period? That is the question we are asking you today. If you choose not to pay, what are the implications? Please be part of this conversation. We have via Skype Mr. Paul Kolditz. He's the Chief Executive Officer for the Federation for Schools Governing Bodies of South Africa. Where we also have via Skype Mr. Lebohang Monchane, the Executive Director for the Independent Schools Association of South Africa. Mr. Monchane, let me welcome to this conversation. Sawubona baba.
Sawubona baba kunjani?
Siyaphila kunjani baba?
Sikhona.
For purposes of understanding what your organization does, nekuthi-ke imelele bobani, nekuthi-ke ingabe le organization yakho itsenzeka kanjani ngale ndzaba ye-COVID-19, please take us through what the organization does and its interests.
Yes, we're the Southern Independent Schools Association of Southern Africa. So we're the largest and most representative independent school association in Southern Africa. And so once our president closed down schools, we had turned schools that were in term. So we've got 4-term and 3-term schools. So for 3-term schools, they were able to continue the school year. And then for the 4-term schools, they only lost 2 days. But when schools had to open after Easter, they opened up. All of them is done remotely through various platforms.
Okay, so how is the non-payment of school fees then impacting schools, generally speaking?
So what we've really encouraged all our schools to do is to encourage parents, and we do encourage parents, if you have lost your job because of COVID-19, please contact your school. So the schools are generally trying to take case-by-case basis to see those parents who need assistance. Obviously, like the banks, if you're up to date with your school fees, you're going to be treated very differently than if you're not up to date. And so our schools are now helping parents to see how we can assist them through this difficult time.
Now, I pose this question to Mr. Kolditz with regards to whether parents should be paying the schools in full, with the understanding that, private schools in particular do have overheads to take care of, such as the water bills, electricity bills, the security costs. And should the parents pay the school fees in full, in as much as we know that they should be paying those issues I've just mentioned. But then why should they pay school fees when, they're not getting value for their money?
Actually, I think in the case of independent schools, like public schools, we have those overheads. But on top of it, teachers in independent schools have not worked this hard. Because they have to teach remotely, they are sitting at home. And I must add, though, there are some public schools also that are teaching remotely. So they too are working very hard. Teachers are now, on top of just the fact that when parents say, we've got our children at home, those teachers too have children at home, but they get to work teaching your children. So really, this is actually quite unprecedented. Those who are working remotely are working harder than when they had the children in the classroom.
All right, Mr. Paul Kolditz, I want you to pick up on this point with regards to remote learning or e-learning or online learning, as it were. And should the online learning be recognized as a continuation of the syllabus when other schools are not learning online, so that it is in sync with the entire education system in South Africa?
Well, yes. As Lebo has said, quite a lot of online learning has been taking place in many public schools. In a survey which we have just completed this morning, it appears that at many schools, they're up to date with the covering of the curriculum. But certainly, we also realize that there are many, many learners who do not have access to online teaching, in the sense that they don't have data, they don't have devices. But for those that are able to continue learning, we can't simply say, go back home and do nothing. Also for the teachers, I mean, after all, the teachers get paid. So they must come up with some sort of plans to reach their children, even if it's only by way of WhatsApp or by way of SMS, to reach their children, to encourage them to continue with learning, and where possible to make resources available. And we know that there are plenty of resources available on radio, on television, on different platforms. And again, also as Labour has said, many teachers in the public sector are working harder than ever before to make sure that their children keep up in different ways. Once schools reopen, every teacher will have to reassess exactly what progress has been made or has not been made to make sure that areas that have not been covered will be covered towards the end of the year or whenever the next phase of the curriculum kicks in.
And again, this takes us back to the big question that has been asked by parents till this far, that should they be paying school fees in full for online learning? Because at the beginning of the year, they were not paying for online education, but they were paying for physical interaction. Because with regards to online learning, there's so much problems that have been encountered with regards to, the internet problems or connectivity problems, and the fact that some learners are not so accustomed of learning online.
Yes, the point is this. You've switched off my. The point is this: that you'll have different sets of circumstances in different schools, in different grades, between different individuals. The approach should be pay your school fees if you're able to do so. If you have one problem or another, any kind of problem with payment of school fees because you believe that you've not been treated fairly, your child has not been given proper access to resources, to online learning, or whatever the case may be, inability to pay fees, contact the school governing body. Don't just keep quiet and withhold payment and believe that your child has not received any service, so you're not paying. Because as I've said, there are overheads. There are the building is closed, but the school is not closed. The school continues to exist and has obligations that it has to comply with.
Mr. Montjane, you've just heard Mr. Colditz there saying that parents should pay up nevertheless. Do you agree or do you not agree?
I think that we really need to remember that this is something that no one wanted and no one had planned for. So I think that in many ways, parents must pay school fees. You've got to understand also that for the first, we don't even know when schools are going to be able to go open up entirely. We're hoping that it's going to happen soon. And hopefully the minister's promised, or expectations rather, that it will open up on the 1st of June may happen. Now, when that happens, schools are going to be able to see, okay, fine. And as Mr. COVID has said, what happens is they're going to assess where are our children. So maybe your September, August holiday may be cut down in half. Saturday classes may be added for the children to be able to catch up, which means we'll only know at the end of the year whether we have had any savings that can be passed on to parents. So we as independent schools are saying, please pay your fees. So as Mr. Kofi said, you've got to come back to a school. And once we've done that, at the end of the year, if there's any rebates that are going to happen, that is going to be passed on. Some of our independent schools have started to give some kind of discounts, but we are not saying, some are doing it now, but most are going to wait until the end of the year. So, for example, we've even got boarding schools. So those boarding schools may open for longer and catch up for the time that they were closed. So that is why we're saying pay your school fees.
Now, here's a very profound and quite significant point that parents have been raising. And I would love the both of you gentlemen to comment on this. Some parents have been saying that since a vaccine has not been found and it won't be found in the next year or so. So they've also resigned themselves to the fact that the school calendar has been lost already, and they've also accepted the fact that their children might be repeating classes next year. So why should they continue paying for this academic year? Mr. Montjane, I'm going to start with you.
I need to be clear here. No one knows what the future is. So no parent can say the school year has been lost. No one knows whether it has or it hasn't. So people really should continue to pay their fees. Also, what is becoming very clear out of the research that we know so far, it is going to be it is now seeming that children do not transmit the virus to adults. And this is an article that came out by Professor Nick Spohr from the University of Stellenbosch. So the reasons for school closures may actually go away. The cost of not having children in school, especially when children are not getting their food meals that a lot of children do receive in public schools. So actually, I expect and suspect that schools are going to open, and then we're going to learn how to do social distancing, wearing of masks, hand sanitizers, washing of hands more regularly, and schools are going to start to operate. So even we as the Independent Schools Association are preparing for children to go back to school. We're most probably going to do a combination of remote learning and in-contact learning, but there is no question in my mind that it looks like we are going to need to open schools.
Mr. Colditz, you agree with that sentiment that parents should continue paying even when the school calendar has been lost, knowing that next year their children will repeating the same grades?
Well, the first point I need to make is that one cannot say that the school calendar is lost, not at this stage. Yes, a couple of days, a number of days have been lost, but they can be made up if we reopen schools quite soon. I want to also emphasize that increasingly scientific evidence is telling us that children are not only not transmitting the disease, but they're also not susceptible to the disease. So it will be possible to reopen schools quite soon, and then recovery of the curriculum will be able to take place quite easily, I believe, towards the end of the calendar year, provided that you give up a couple of school holidays, cut the holidays shorter, trim the curriculum to the essential building blocks for the next year. So there's no way that we can say that the academic year has been lost. Not at all, that the calendar has been lost. No, that's not the case. And I believe that towards the end of the year, as Lebo has said, we'll be able to see that we've completely recovered, provided that all the new protocols with regard to washing of hands, social distancing, etc., are adhered to strictly, and the whole community, the whole South African community, buys in to that, to those protocols. I wish everybody could hear Professor Shabir Mahdi speaking on this, and then we'll be able to understand better that the risk to our children is actually minimal.
All right, gentlemen, let's leave it there for now and take a quick break. Nangabe uqeda-ke kuhlanganyela nathi, and if you just switch to SABC 1 right now, well done, you did the right thing, because this will directly affect you. Sikhuluma ke ngizabe ukuthi-ke badala kumele baqhubeke babhadale ti-school fees njengoba-ke tikolo-ke tivaliwe. Tweet us and do engage with us. Noma-ke ushayele licingo ku-0117146919 noma-ke 0117146918. Ungaphinde ufike ubeke nombono wakho ku-Facebook. Asesithi shelele ngasetolo. Leli Yilungelo Lakho. A lot of parents have lost their jobs, and no job means no source of income. Ingabe tikhona tinhlelo ke etikolweni tekusita labo batali. Sishayele ke licingo ke ukhulume nathi ke ngaleyo ndlela le. Sina Phindile Themba ulapha ke eHammanskraal. Sekumole lihlelo nisawubona.
Hello, uyangiva?
Hi Phindile, sekumole lihlelo nisawubona.
Uyangizwa futhi? Uyangizwa?
Yeah, siyakuva mama, chubeka mama. What's on your mind?
Baba, ngifuna ukukhomenta kule topic eyikolo. Abazali fanele bakhokhe ngoba mabaye ezikolweni basayina ama contract. Ukuthi kwenzakalani asinto ukuthi manje siyenza si-talent iy'kolo ngoba abakwazi ukumaintaina ngeke bakhiphe nama-employment abomama ethu nama-teacher because of ingabhathani. So it's an obligation efanele siyenze, and singabazali uma kubuyiswa si-understand si-discusse kahle, unlike sibe at loggerhead flow si-disagree entweni esinga-understand.
Angakuva kahle ukhulume ke ngendzaba ye-contract ukuthi batali ke basayine i-contract ne?
Yes, for a year. Sayishana mina futhi nengibhadala i-school fees somntwana for the whole year.
So-
I understand ukuthi kine-contract na yesikole.
Kahle uthi batali abachubeke babhadale because basayine le contract.
Baba. To maintain the school as well.
Okay, all right. Phindile siyabonga kakhulu umbono wakho, siyabonga kakhulu futhi nakusishayela ke. Our guests will engage that point in just a moment. Sesivele ke bekunene ke bathi abachubeke batali babhadale ngoba basayine i-contract nakucala lo mnyaka. Kepha ke leyo contract ke is very interesting because le contract yekuthi bafunze bantwana besikole bafunze kuze kuphele lo mnyaka. Kepha naku nyalo bantwana bahlele emakhaya. Indzaba ye-contract it's a very tough balancing act. We'd love our guests to engage us on that. Gentlemen, I'm sure you've heard, okay, just for purposes of Mr. Paul called it, so you might not necessarily have understood the point there. She was saying that since parents have signed a contract at the beginning of the year, so therefore they should continue paying their school's fees for the duration of the academic year. But then so many questions have been raised. Well, she actually raises a very valid point, but so many questions have been raised with the fact that their contract entailed continuous learning, which is not happening at this point. What's your thoughts on this?
Well, as I explained earlier, can you hear me?
I can hear you clearly. Go on.
Okay, as I explained earlier, this is a statutory obligation. It's not even necessary to sign a contract with a public school. I'm not talking about independent schools. Public schools, it's a statutory obligation. The law says you must pay, provided that there is a resolution of a parent meeting that approved the budget and approved a school fee. Then you have to pay that school fee irrespective of whether the service is being delivered or not. There is at least a moral obligation on the school, apart from its legal obligation towards other third parties such as water and electricity, to the municipality, salaries to employees, etc., etc., etc. There's a moral obligation on the school to say, to at least try to provide education on a continuing basis and on an online basis or any other basis. But as I've said, if it was a contractual relationship. Let me take an example. I get garden services to do my garden once a week. If they don't pitch up, I don't pay them. That's because I have a contract with them in terms of which they must first deliver a service and then I pay. It's totally different with regard to the legal obligation to pay school fees in the case of a public school. But there's an important exception. And that is if you cannot pay because you've lost your job or if your salary has been reduced, then you have the option in the case of the public school sector of applying for exemption in accordance with the exemption regulations as I explained earlier. And then the governing body of the school must apply the criteria listed in the exemption regulations to your particular circumstances to determine whether you qualify for either a full exemption, a partial exemption, or a conditional exemption. Conditional basically where you are an entrepreneur. You have to close your business for 2 months. You had to close your business for 2 months, but for those 2 months, in other words, you had no income, but in the third month, you'll again start earning money, so you'll be able to catch up on payment of your school fees from the third month onwards. Then you'll be granted a conditional exemption of payment of school fees. But it's important to understand that this is not a contractual relationship. It's not because you signed a contract, it's because the law says you must pay. But there's the option of relief in terms of the exemption regulations or an arrangement with a school governing body for a payment holiday.
Fair enough there, Mr. Colditz. Now, Mr. Montjane, you just heard Mr. Colditz saying that it's not necessarily a contractual obligation, but it is the law. You are legally mandated to pay school fees. So are parents in breach, or are they not in breach of this contractual arrangement between parents and schools if they don't pay? And they're also justified in not paying for services that's not been rendered.
Yes, I think that Lomama Okadukfuna is telling the truth here. Abantwana bayafunda. I mean, all the schools, the Panel Sasa, all our school children are learning. Namanje umntana mangena esikole independent bangithumela incwadi fanele ahambe ayenze lokhu. So there's no such thing. So we must look at this premise. If you're paying a fee, most probably you're still learning. So if you're learning, you must pay the fee. And we took legal advice and looked at the document, and the document said, in terms of the SASA contract, which we send out for schools, we are providing an education. The contract permits us to provide remote learning and in-contact learning. So we need to really focus that if your child is getting learning and is learning some form from an independent school, please pay for the service. Because laba teacher, they're going to correct your child's work. They're going to do all of these other things that they would normally do, but they're just doing it remotely. Actually, we don't call it online learning, we call it remote learning.
All right, let's leave it there for now. Let's take our next caller. Sina Maria lapha eMpumalanga. Segumuhle lihleleni sawubona.
Sawubona baba kunjani?
Siyaphila kunjani mama?
Ngiyaphila baba.
Khuluma nathi mama.
Okay, mina inkinga yami ngile futhi imali ye-school fees asinankinga siyayikhokhela ngethi. Inkinga ama-hostel siwabhadala njani ama-hostel ngoba abantwana sinabo la emakhaya.
Okay, good question. Good question. Gentlemen, back to you. In as much as Umaria still pays school fees, but why should she continue paying for hostel fees or boarding fees, as it were?
Well, that in the case of a public school, that is boarding is a contractual arrangement. So parents don't have to pay boarding fees if that service is not provided.
Okay.
That is a different arrangement. The same with aftercare, preschool, etc. Those are all contractual arrangements that they don't have to pay for if the service is not provided.
Okay, Mr. Munjane?
Yeah, no, I mean, as well, no, Paul, but I think that what we have to remember, and as Ubaba Paul said earlier on, even though the boarding school is closed, there may be costs that cannot be saved. Maybe food can be saved, but electricity, amanzi, you know, the municipality doesn't stop charging you for those things. So what we are saying to our independent schools, Coca, and then at the end of the year, if there's a savings, it will be transmitted to you. So what we found in independent schools also on the boarding proportion, some of it is not being charged until they know when children can go back to boarding school. Then the bill will be sent at that time. So Maria Magakala, but at the end of the day, as I said, in schools, especially independent schools, 80 to 90% of the budget is salaries.
Yeah.
So that is very little savings schools can have. They can transmit it back to parents. So, of course, you're going to want the teacher to be in the dorm, to be there to look after your child. And if that person is not paid, how do we expect that to happen?
All right, gentlemen, we'll leave it there for now. We'll take a quick break. And after the break, I would love to engage both of you with regards to the issue of UIF and whether it is fair for parents to be concerned about the welfare of teachers when they can apply for UIF. We'll tackle on that issue after the break. As Pinza City, please do interact with us. 011-714-6918. Ubeke umbono wakho ngiyathi bekunene ukuthi lena ke indzaba mlonyeni indzaba ke lesithinza sonke nangabe ungumntali leli lungelo lakho. Welcome back Mbugeli. Sisahleli ke ehleleni na Lebohang Montjane kanye ke na Paul Coldit sebasicacisela kabanti ke ngana indzaba yokubhadala ke school fees njengoba ke kune lockdown. Let's take our next caller. Sina Lebo ulapha ke Midrand. Sakumole ehleleni sawubona.
Yebo njani baba?
Siyaphila kunjani mama?
Ngiyaphila.
Khuluma nathi mama.
I think I'll base my input mostly on independent schools and online learning because my kids are independent schools. So my issues will be more addressed to Mr. Monjani. The first thing that I would like to say is coronavirus has affected all of us in this country.
Right.
All of us. And parents are part of the people that have been affected. And as parents, I don't think parents are saying they don't want to be paying school fees. I'll give you practical examples. with online learning, the teacher is sitting somewhere else. She prepares the material, she posts it up on the system, or she conducts the class on the system. That child needs somebody to be there with them, to supervise them. Who does that? It's the parents.
Yeah.
If the child doesn't understand something, the parent has to help. So I think the input that the parents are making is being really honestly undermined and not being taken into cognizance. To say, even if you are a parent on lockdown working at home, you can't do nothing. Your whole morning until 2 in the afternoon, you have to be supervising this child and making sure that he has all the resources required, and it's costly.
Yeah.
It takes a whole lot of data. There's a whole level of printing that is happening, and you have to make sure that the child is concentrated on the work and they are able to do what they are required to do. So there is work that is school work that the parent also does. And please, they mustn't, not understand. We really honestly appreciate their efforts to make sure that teaching does happen. But all that I'm saying is parents are also affected. They can't function as they should be functioning, even if they are working from home. If you are not working from home, you have to go to work. It's a problem because you leave a child that needs to be supervised as well at home doing online learning.
All right.
The third thing, we're not saying school fees must not be paid. We understand that school fees must be paid, but they need to meet us halfway as well. We are people as well.
All right, great point you made there, Lebo. Thank you so much for your thoughts and for your reflections. And Mr. Lebohang, I hope you have taken note of that. We'll definitely come back to you. But let's take another caller. Now, Anonymous, ulapha ke Soweto. Sakumule lihlele sawubona.
Yebo sawubona baba.
Yebo kunjani mama?
Ngiyaphila njani?
Siyaphila khuluma. Khuluma nathi mama.
Oh, bengithi sengibhadalile mina school fees for this year already, January. For
Okay.
the whole year, it was 7,000 rand at a public school. So I just needed to know the way forward, whether it's my loss or maybe should I go back and claim for the refund since schools are closed for now.
Aha, that's a question that is on parents' minds. Thank you so much for raising that, Anonymous Soweto. And I'd love both gentlemen to respond to that. Mr. Munjane, Ulebo Midrand was talking about the online learning principle. Earlier on, teachers at independent or private schools are the hardest working in this period. No, the parents are actually the hardest working during this period, because if a child does not understand, then it is the parent who has to make the child understand by all means possible. And we know that so many parents are not actually qualified to be imparting such knowledge on their children. What's your thoughts?
Simpiwe, ngizwana no bito one. So I really fully agree with her. It's absolutely true. We also often always talk about the school and the parents are in partnership. Now, COVID-19 is showing us exactly what that means. So even before COVID-19, homework, what happens? The school asks the parent to sign the homework, to show the homework and save. And I think that I'm so glad Gudulebo also admits she appreciates it, because it's the teacher who's saying this is the material that needs to be covered to prepare the child for their future. And we do understand how much parents are doing. And I really must say, I fully agree with her. And it's really tough for all of us. And that is why this is about a partnership. And I think that schools understand that as well. And we will be seeing, I think, schools really, once we go back to school, communicating with parents and trying to assist those parents, especially who have lost their jobs and etc. So that is something that I've told you. Even some of our schools, they're even helping abantwana who are vulnerable.
Yeah.
Buying school parcels and all of those other stuff.
Yeah. Mr. Colditz, we had an anonymous caller from Soweto who's saying that she's paid 7,000 already at the beginning of the year. That is the school fees in full. So what should happen next? Should she go back to the school and get her refund?
Well, I think Lebo has explained that only towards the end of the year will you be able to assess if your child has lost anything. The point is, and I did not mention that right at the beginning, that the school fee is determined over for the next year at a parents' meeting. So it will be 7,500 Rand for the year. It's payable up front.
Yeah.
But the majority of schools make the arrangement that it can be paid in installments, normally 10 installments of 750 Rand each in this particular case. So once you've paid it, you've complied with your statutory obligation, and you do not have the right to go back and say, listen, please refund me, because that would be tantamount to going to Mr. Edward Kispete and saying to him, listen, I've paid my income tax, but I did not receive all the services that I was entitled to. Please refund me on my income tax. It's the same principle that applies.
Right, right.
I know it sounds strange, but that is in fact the principle. So yes, she'll not be entitled to claim a refund.
Okay, great stuff. Let's leave it there for now. We'll take a quick break. Let's take our final commercial break. Ungasanyakati, siyabuya khona nyalo. Siyayicucumbela ke indzaba yethu namhla sikhuluma ngendaba yokubhadala kwe-school fees ukuthi ingabe badala kumele bachubeke yini bathi ibhadale ke le-school fees. And ladies and gentlemen, there's various facets to this kind of conversation, one of which is the learner or the parent and the school relationship being a contractual one, and therefore both parties need to stick by the regulations of that kind of contractual regulation, or rather contractual obligation. And there's also issues of overheads that the school needs to take care of, such as electricity bills and water bills and security in general, and whether parents should continue taking this into consideration. We have a representative of the Independent Schools of South Africa and the school governing bodies of South Africa representing public schools, Mr. Paul Colditz na Lebohang Munchane. Now, gentlemen, just before we wrap the show, as we're having this conversation, Basic Education Minister Angie Motshekga has revealed that in some schools, parents are not paying schools already, and this will affect the salaries of the governing body appointed teachers. Now, it certainly is a tough balancing act, because the question the question will be, should the focus be on the welfare of teachers, which is definitely not the responsibility of parents, or should the focus be on the parents who continuously pay the school fees and not get the value of their money? Mr. Mchane, I'll start with you.
Simpio, we've all got to work together, yes, find sense of sonke, and we must help each other. Really, this is about our children. It really is not about the teacher or the parent. This is about the children and their futures. So we must all do our part to try and assist schools. And also, when you look at the fact that, as the minister says, that this would affect positions of school governing bodies, that also these are the additional teachers that the school has hired to assist schools to educate their children better. So we in the independent sector, as you know, all our teachers are paid based out of the salaries. So really, let us focus on our children and let us all work together with to create a better future for our children.
Mr. Colditz, you just heard Mr. Munchane there saying that, it should be a collaborative effort, because COVID-19 has affected all parties, be it parents, be it teachers, be it the government sector or in the private sector. But then the question is it fair for parents to pay school fees, to take care of the welfare of the governing body appointed teachers, yet these teachers are entitled to claim from UIF?
Well, I agree wholeheartedly with what Lebo has said. We need to collaborate on this. We need to understand that it affects everybody, but in essence, it affects all of our future. The future of our children, the education and future of our children affect us. It is true that special provision has been made in the UIF COVID fund to assist the schools and teachers to compensate teachers. but not at the level at which they are being compensated. And
Right.
those
Unfortunately,
teachers,
we don't have much time, Mr. Colditz. Your closing remarks as we wrap the show?
well, I would really just plead with parents, please continue as far as possible, and if you can, continue with payment of your school fees, because it is the future of the whole education system that is at stake, and essentially the future of your child.
Mr. Lebohang Montjane, your closing remarks?
I want to confirm what Paul said, but just add, if a parent is finding themselves in trouble, even at an independent school, please contact the independent school as soon as possible, and they will see what they can do to assist families.
Lebohang Montjane and Mr. Paul Colditz, it's been an absolutely beautiful and stimulating conversation. Thank you so much for your thoughts and for your reflections. Much appreciated. Siliphetha kanjalo kwelihlelo bekunene ke asisithembe ukuthi ke ucaciselekile embutweni lobo unawo mayelana nenzaba school fees ngesikhathi ke se-lockdown. Many thanks to our guests for their valuable contribution, and from Miss Mphiwe Ngongwane and the rest of the team, do have a blessed week. Ngisale kahle.